We start with Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress. They have suspended their indefinite nationwide strike last night after reviewing their meeting with the federal government side. The decision to suspend the strike followed an emergency extraordinary meeting by the National Executive of the unions held last night in Abuja. NLC had earlier listed 6 conditions it said must be met by the federal government before it could call off the strike. The conditions contained in a series of posts via its official X handle included the arrest and prosecution of Special Advisor to the Imo State Governor on Special Duties, Chinasa Nwaneri, police officers as well as thugs involved in the attack on NLC President Joe Ajero in Owerri, and arrests, prosecute, and dismissal of Chief Security Officer in Imo State Government House, identified as SP Shaba. Also, the National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu says some suspects have been arrested for the assault on the President of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Joe Ajero, in Owerri, the Imo State capital. In a statement, Ribadu says he regrets the incident on Ajero and condemns it as it was against the rule of law and the principle of freedom of association and expression subscribed to by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his administration. Ribadu further promises to make the outcome of the investigation public as soon as it is concluded and appeals to the NLC to call off the strike to allow the dialogue process underway to be exhausted. Joining us now on the morning show is Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise Analyst and Dean of Law, Ave Maria University, Nasarawa State. Dr. Sam Amadi, it's good to see you this morning. So help me understand, what's your thoughts about the role that I will say is almost unprecedented, having someone who's not in charge of Ministry of Employment, Labor and Productivity, and not in charge of the economy, being the National Security Advisor to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, playing that role that is required to temper things down and help the labor members to call off a strike. It's almost unprecedented. I don't know whether your sense of history makes it possible for you to recall any such incident in the past.
No, I don't think we've had that kind of open involvement and leadership of the National Security Advisor in what looks like purely domestic issues. We've seen NSAs look like dark figures somewhere in the basement of power and behind stringing things, maybe bringing reports and telling the president where the next coup might come from or where the insurgents are coming or who is not really committed to the job. We don't see them, bringing parties together and kind of being the lead person to resolve open, not secret, the open conflicts. And it's a testimony to maybe Nuhu Ribadu's on not much discussed skills and network and maybe temperament. When he was appointed National Security Advisor, I was one of those who didn't quite think he was fit for the job because of my understanding of using the American example that you need a high-profile policy person in international policy and maybe someone who is immersed in the network, global network of polity in terms of security, in terms of issues, NGO world, or in terms of how nations are undermining strategic grand strategy in international politics. So I thought probably he was deficient in those. But it's looking like maybe there is a good peak in context of the weakness of those who are manning domestic policy. So it's the Minister of Labor and Productivity or Employment, whichever it is now, that should lead on this. But it looks like the two of them seem to lack that first, temperament to understand engagement with civil society. 2, maybe the energy level and the sense of focus to really know how to track these guys who you call activists. And again, some sense in which they're disconnected from the world of activism. I think Nurubadu builds on his understanding about this world and friendship, this is critical now, and credibility with these communities to say, okay, guys, trust me. And he tries to deliver for them. And don't forget, when Nigeria was brutalized, the story was that it was actually a call made to Nuhu Ribadu. He quickly got him out of real harm and then has been communicating with the leadership of the Labour Party, of the Labour NLC and TUC, reassuring them of government commitment and kind of staving off conflicts. But others, people like Bayon Ogadem, keep on issuing statements that are very inflammatory and necessary. So it's really surprising that Nuhu Ribadu is coming out to be the star boy of the government at this time.
So is that not sad? Is that not shocking? Is that not an indictment? A national security advisor will have to wade into this. Somebody will have thought, where was even the Attorney General? All we remember the Attorney General did in all of this was the fact that the Attorney General reminded Labour. Oh, you can't hear us? We'll try to take a quick break. We'll take a quick pause. We'll come back to you. Okay, so we have Mr. Sam Amadi back. And great to have you, sir. Like I was saying, it's not an indictment on arrangements and things, how things are run generally. Number one, how I wish it was the Attorney General that took this stand. But we remember what the Attorney General did do. The spokesperson of the ministry just issued a statement reminding Labour of a court injunction that they must not go on strike that they got on the 10th of November. That's all the Attorney General did do. Nobody in the government affirmed the fact that even Nigeria was hurt and they would investigate and bring the culprits to book and make sweeping arrests like this. Is that not a big indictment on the way we run things in this country? Is it not a sad day for Nigeria, really?
Absolutely.
Your take on this, please.
Oh, thank you very much. I think you're right about it. See, look, the Attorney General's office, we've always quarreled, the Attorney General should be split into Solicitor General, the Minister of Justice, Attorney General. I don't think that's the point. The point is that the profile of persons who are appointed that office have been deficient. Let me say it very clear. Under Yaradua, I did a memo to the President, unsolicited memo. I said, look, when you people choose Attorney Generals, choose policy lawyers. Choose lawyers at the intersection of law and public policy. Stop choosing litigators. If you look at the history of the US or elsewhere in the world where Attorney Generals, whatever they call the Minister of Justice, are taken, either they are academics or policy persons who understand how to oversight governance. So most of our Attorney Generals have been persons who have been maybe excelled in litigation and they are senior advocates and they put them there. They basically have no clue around the workings of government and public policy. So that's what you see. That's the gap you see. So they do three things. They issue statements, they go and get order from courts, and then they slam that order. But look, if you look at modern governance, even from Max Weber's theory up till now, no matter how you look at it, law is at the heart of it. You're talking about electoral reform, you're talking about labor, the processes for engagement with government, you're talking about how government should treat labor. So it's not just about court-based law, it's about policy law. It's about how do you manage all these things, get labor to sit down and say, okay, fine, labor may have an issue, even though we might not meet that issue, but there might be processes for dealing with it. So the Attorney General should be the one actually doing what Nuhu Ribadu is doing. Maybe he'll have Nuhu by the side in terms of very deep security issues, but essentially he should be leading it. That's the job of Attorney General. But
he went fighting.
They resort to...
He went fighting, so that's the problem here. Rather than quell the matter, he went reminding them of a court injunction.
I'm coming to that. You see, what the Attorney General and Minister of Justice have done is to weaponize the courts. Industrial courts seize there. They know that there's always an industrial dispute. And the moment they come, they go and get ex parte order. They're leveraging on their control of the judicial branch of government. You see, the senior lawyers, this is not just a happenstance. The senior lawyers in this country are in certain incestuous relationship with judges that get things that ought not to. Why do I always get ex parte against a union that has outstanding dispute against you, always at their back. And if you look at this ex parte, they are at large. They have no time out. You can give people ex parte in one day. Come this evening and let me hear you. I'm opposed to the way government go and collect ex parte orders and tie their opponents, whether it's political parties, politicians, or unions, tie their hands. The essence of justice is this. If there's need to avert an intervention, you call them. A court can schedule for 4 p.m. and say, Labour, show reason why I should not restrain you from going on strike. See, strike is not sabotage. Strike is part of the spectrum of power. The government has the coercive power. Labour has the power of strike and protest. Citizens have the power to protest. Voice and power. So if in a democracy you foreclose the resort to legitimate use of power, the power of protest, the power of voice, the power of dissent, then you are criminalizing dissent and then creating opportunity for self-help. So I think that the courts should read the design and rethink how they grant injunctions again. Otherwise, Labour will be forced to disobey these orders, and it gets back to weakening the judicial system. So I think that attorney generals have failed in their job. They only focus on enhancing, creating conflict. You know, the issue is always, you are wrong. You are going to be put in prison for disobeying the court. That's not the point here. The point here is to get Labour back to the table, let them see that government is dealing with the issues, and help, you know, avert a conflict that can cause enormous economic, you know, damage. So if you are a strategic thinker, you would say, which is better, to read the Riot Act and Labour paralyzes the country for 2-3 days, or to get Labour to sit there and say, you know what, push forward this year protest, we're going to look at this XY issue. And again, strikes and threat of strikes are an invitation to negotiation. When people say, oh, you announced a strike and then you ended it, it's the proper way. It's to say, come and give us good faith assurance that you're going to discuss these issues. And when government comes and say, we're ready to do this, and they show credible commitment, Labour rightly, you know, shaves off that strike. So the notion that once Labour says we're going to strike, you should go to court and get an injunction that nobody really cares about anymore, it's laughable. That's not the work of an Attorney General. The work of an Attorney General is to supervise not just the judicial aspect of governance, but the policy issues around it, and to ensure that government delivers on this, but at the same time respect the rights and liberties of citizens and govern in a way that law supports economic development. That's the imperative for attorney generals. You look at their skill set around policy, understanding the economy, understanding the pluralism and how to manage it, not just the skill to go to court and cash out or crash out a judgment in your favor. That's not the work of attorney generals in a democracy.
Dr. Sam Amadi, one of the things that crossed my mind over the last 24 hours was what we used to do when we were kids. We know that our father has the right to punish whoever is wrong. So your brother or your friend gives you a slap, and you give a dirty slap in return. Let's bring that to the issue of the Nigerian government. They choose to not obey court orders. And then Labour decided to do self-help as well. Failed to obey court orders, saying that they must not go on strike. What kind of anarchy are we trying to create? So please help us understand, at what point do we stop? Do we wait for the federal government to always obey court order before other people will do? Because the level it will get to is, I will fight someone and court will say I must not fight, and then I will disobey, and we create anarchy. Help us understand, where do we stop to prevent anarchy in Nigeria?
I think it's very simple. All court orders ought to be obeyed, should be obeyed. But this is textbook. In reality, see what happens. The society is designed in a way that's what we call moral signaling. And that's why the law is designed to, you know, make sure that we don't have mass-scale violence. So, for example, if you feel cheated, you go to court. The notion is that you're going to get justice. Now, at the end of the day, you may not get justice, depending on how you interpret justice. But at the end of the day, the process for denying you what you want is transparent, is open, reassuring. You might go home and say, oh my God, the judge didn't see the point. But you don't go home and say, oh my God, the judge and my accuser were seen drinking last night, and that's why he slammed me with this defeat. That's very important, the critical difference. The whole process for judicial craft is designed to give assurance to people that the judge is fair-minded, not partisan, not interested. So losers rue their fate, but they don't go and impeach the credibility of the judge, and therefore they don't go and try to destroy the legal framework. That's how it works. It's underwritten by public trust, some intangibles called trust. It's not even underwritten by power. Yes, in some short-term measure, you can use power to enforce the authority of the court, but the authority of the court is self-enforcing because it's built around a mechanism everybody accepts as good for everybody. Now, see what has happened over the years. When the courts are now seen to be instrument of the ruling class all over the world, you now start seeing self-help. Look at the US, the Black Lives Matter. I mean, policing. Supposed to be for all. But when there's now a history of unfair policing, and then people do not find effective remedies through another process, whether executive, legislative oversight, public hearing, or court itself, then there is sort of violence. And that's why in some part of the US, people are talking about creeping anarchy, chaos in cities, because the authority of the state is being questioned, for good or for bad. Now, in Nigeria today, the Nigerian statecraft, and when I was in government, I used to argue, they said, Sam, you're an activist in government. I said, no, there are different models of governance. George Orwell says government is the act of telling people the truth. Governance is not the act of lying, of brutalizing, of dark arts. You come and hide the ball. It's about transparency. It's about winning hearts and mind. So from that school of governance, the government itself will be the first to obey laws. You see, assuming a court gives an order to produce Mr. B, the government should produce Mr. B. Sometimes the risk in compliance is very low, but that's an ingrained attitude that we are government. I'm governor. Why should I obey these guys that will pay their salary? That's the point. That's the cultural problem. That's the normative problem, that I'm government. Therefore, government has a capacity to get whatever it wants. So if the court says, release Mr. Mefele, for example, you control the state. You can monitor him. You can overshadow him, make sure he doesn't escape out of your jurisdiction, but release him and go back to court and say, court, for so reasons, this man should be taken back to custody. If you lose, you take it in good faith. So that's where it starts. So now citizens now see that actually this court that we think is decisive is not actually decisive. So if I have somewhere I can go to, if I have talks I can put in, then I can disobey the court. So the problem is always government. The sense that it signals to citizens that the institutions, the myths around justice, it's just a myth. It's not. There's nothing real about the courts. We choose and pick. And so I think we should obey the courts all the time, but at the same time, government has the responsibility to signal to citizens that it has confidence in the judicial system.
Dr. Sam Amadi, another red flag. Is it not an indictment on our state? The police exonerated themselves in a statement written last week. Said they had nothing to do with it. In fact, they said they saved it from the mob, Mr. Ajero. Now, with this arrest of key personnel, which also involve police officers by the NSA, it's an indictment of the police for what happened, what they told last week. Can we say that the police misrepresented the facts? Is this not an indictment on our system? If a police command said something last week and the NSA is overriding that and also arresting police officers as key culprits in the matter. That's number one. Number two, what would you say about the likes of Mr. Sherman, a former labor leader in this country, and now says, oh, labor shouldn't, make all this brouhaha. They should focus more on the issue of people, but they shouldn't make all this brouhaha about this particular case. When we know the role he too played when he was labor leader in this country, is that not an indictment of the shrinking civil society space in our country? Two questions.
Absolutely. Well, let me start with the first. Look, let me say, I'm sorry, I don't have confidence in the Nigerian police, and I'll tell you why. I did the work. When I came back to Nigeria, the first work I did was for NOPRIN and the Police Service Commission to look at rejigging the police. And one of the theories we have about police reform is that the DNA of policing is anti-people. The Nigerian police is conceived as a force against the people, restive natives. So the police has always kind of institutionalized and reified that idea that the police exists against the people. Forget all the sham of reforms. Nothing really substantial has happened. Again, the police itself lacks transparency in terms of how it manages its affairs. And so what you see, take for example the videos, the optics and the stories around elections, off-season election. Everywhere you talk about whether it's ballot snatching, scaring people away, beating up agents, or attacking political opponents, always about the use of the police force. And I've argued that maybe you're going to have a better election. Try it once and take the police out of this show. Because they're the ones who give coercion, who give power to some of this misbehavior. Now, the story that is clear, Ajero went to Owerri, even wrote to the IG, wrote to the director of the DGSS, met with him, and took 10 police officers and about 6 naval ratings to the office. He went to the office, sat down with some Arise and I think China's television crew about to start a press conference. Nobody else was there. There was no match going on. The police, the area commander came in and asked this police protection to stand back, and they stood back, and he himself handed a to those people who brutalized him. So clearly, and if you talk about the stories around the Chinasa stories, they're always with police officers from the Tiger base or from the government house. And I've argued, the police is not an institution for governors. The governors have their own police protection. Why do we insist on taking the police to the governors? So the corruption in the police is so deep. It's an indictment, clear, on the police. Now, if Nuhu Badu did not take the initiative by himself, the IG and the police hierarchy would not do anything because they are acting clearly in cahoot with those thugs and those persons that the Imo State governor and like other governors have. This is not peculiar to Imo. We have come to a level where if any governor wants a police to come and brutalize you, we've seen in this democracy, in Cross River, in Kaduna, in several places, we are journalists who are taken away, beaten up, and locked away for months. The police has no professional obligation to obey a governor who gives a wrong advice. The police has no obligation to obey aid of governor and to go and attack a person. But because there's no oversight, no accountability, the police system is almost like dark book. When I had to intervene in the case of Chuchu Dinamde at the anti-terrorism police squad, Sabah Karam unit, brilliant officers, they told me, some of them told me, said, sir, if the politicians leave us alone, the police has the competence, the capability to police fairly. That's why when they go to the UN, where there's no governor to buy them over, to bribe them, they perform. But once they come here, it becomes another instrument of degenerate governance. So the police should be ashamed of itself that it made a statement and say, oh, we took him to custody. Contrary to the facts, very clear. And since then, for 14 days, the Inspector General of Police did not say trigger investigation. I said, look, in 2 days, this is the report I got. XYZ police officers were behaved wrongly. They were used against their ethics and their professional code, and this is how we want to. You see, if they do that, Labour will not go to strike. People are saying, oh, why should Labour go to strike and paralyze a country for beating up its chief? The blame is the federal government. If an ordinary citizen is beaten up, it's a responsibility of the federal government to say who did it. It's a citizen. Talk less of the leader of the largest labor force in Africa, and you are telling us why should we go on strike for beating him up, and the people who beat him up under the cover and the color of state, the police. And you've done nothing. So really, what Nuhu has done shows that maybe we shouldn't trust the police. And it's sad. If the IG is listening to us, they should do something. Stop pretending. We know that we don't trust the police because they are involved in several things. The NSA crisis was a combination. But even after that, the police has continuously misbehaved. not taking the responsibility, and the starting point is to remove themselves from politicians. The police is not an instrument. It's not an instrument of governance in that executive sense.
The second question about the likes of former labor leaders now speaking and saying no.
Absolutely.
What would you say about the likes of Mr. Adams Oshiomhole?
Thank you. You see, I'm close to the comrade, and I like him for some areas, but I think it's really, he should issue some apology to his colleagues. I mean, when he was labor leader under PDP, nothing that Ajero and his colleagues have done comes anywhere close to what Adams Oshiomhole did in terms of, even if you like, quote unquote, gangsterism, you know, jumping up on the platforms. He has the charisma, the energy, beat about, rush to State House, lead his people, invade National Assembly when a proper constitutional proceeding to impeach the president then, Obasanjo, was going on. Now, whether it's true or false, but that's a legislative process. He went with his colleagues to say, you can't do that. He was lied alive. And so for him to come back, that's the point. That's the point I'm making. I said nothing they have done comes close to, whether it's gangsterism, whether it's hubris, howsoever defined. He did everything against the book. He did more than what's in the book. But again, it speaks to the fact that comrades, quote unquote, who have got into government, always see things different. I have some bragging right to say, even when I was in government, they were calling me NGO leadership. It's not about opportunism. It's the fact that there are core principles about good governance. A labor leader understands that a part of Nigeria's underdevelopment and poverty, by Action Aid and Oxfam particularly, is that we have very poor labor protection laws. I did work for the USAID as a labor consultant, and we discovered that Nigeria has the worst labor protection. If you look at our laws, if you look at our processes, and that's what is engendering poverty, because I have no protection for the people. I expect Dr. Senator Adams Oshiomhole to be the lead voice, strengthening labor, strengthening civil society, and again, the ACN wing of the APC came to power because of that romance. And in 2015, I warned the civil society group that they're getting too embedded in APC. So the Adams, as the former chairman, should show some gratitude to the labor movement, that this is actually part of the platform they use to create the impression, now seen as false, that they had a more progressive credential. So for me, it's really hypocritical for him to say that. And it's a betrayal of the trust of comrades who are suffering. Today, the labor well-being is worse than ever. If you look at the minimum wage, look at the poverty level, look at the price inflation in terms of price and energy and other things, look at the forex crisis. So today, labor, maybe not the government's fault or their fault, it's a different matter. But the point is that today, the working people are suffering more than they have ever suffered. And therefore, the former president of the NLC should be the voice speaking, and to not rise up and speak clearly about the dehumanization of labor leader who did not go for a party campaign. They say, oh, Ajero may go to which day politics. Ajero went there, scheduled, wrote to the IG, wrote to the DSS director, DG, and said, we are going to go and deal with this labor issue. And they flew in with all the labor leaders. And when we were going to labor office, his own office, he was brutalized. That is really an attack against not just NSA and TUC, but against the working people. Because it speaks of a institutional disdain and disregard for what labor stands for. So it's not about Ajero as a person. Ajero is too small. I mean, they can be beaten up on the street. It's actually about an attack at the institutional credibility of the labor movement. And a former president shouldn't be speaking in tongues. He should be out there blazing and saying, never, this is contrary to our party. The president should make sure that whoever is involved is held, and not to speak around. Labor should focus on what is he talking about. Labor is focused on the real issues. If you're owing workers 48 months, if you discount working people and say they are ghost worker without any verification or empirical, that is, if Ajero didn't go to Owerri and get brutalized, then he's not a labor leader. He had intelligence that they're going to attack him from his house, he still went to the place to say, let's address the media. That's what a labor leader does. And when he gets beaten up, then the former labor leader, shamelessly, in my view, I think he should issue a statement, kind of apologizing to the working force in this country. I like him, I respect him, but yes. I think he crossed the line.
Okay, all right. Let me ask you this final question then. It was going through my mind that Nigeria's economy is in a dire strait, and that we are in very serious trouble with our economy. So many economists, especially even organized labor, said that, organized employer, those who are employers of labor, they have said that, Nigeria Labour Congress, TUC, should not be having strikes at this point in time because it has serious implication for the economy that is in a downward turning southward. What would you be saying to Labour, considering the state of our economy, as alternative to strike? And what would you be saying to government to do to ensure that Labour does not have to go on strike at all?
Very good question. Again, it's clear that strike is not a good thing for the economy, even of the striking persons themselves, of families, and of the economy. So we need people to work and work productively. But again, there are two sides to this. The first, if you look at labor economics also, it tells you that workplace democracy improves productivity. We need to look at our labor laws and practices and ensure that working people have confidence in the system they're working for and have benefits. And I'll give an example. When I was NEC chairman, I put 2 billion, I think, as staff housing, and the National Assembly invited me, Senate said, why should you be giving your staff 20 million, 10 million, 30 million as loan with 1% interest rate, discounted interest rate, declining interest rate? And I told him, I said, look, these are the people who are going to be passing tariffs. If they put 0.0, you get into trouble. They must have capacity to own houses. And today, each of them pay, that's not the fault. So the notion that productivity is basically about capital, no, it's also about labor. So we should ensure that we look at our labor laws and practices. That's number one. There'll be conflict. But you must be in good relationship with the labor leaders so that when there's a conflict, there will be no need to strike. Strike, it should be, last minute, last point. Strike is a fatal action that you don't need to engage in strikes often and on. No, it shouldn't happen. It should be that there's confidence in the structure that labor can raise this issue and be confident that the government will address it. Again, things are difficult for government, of course, partly its own lack of prudence. I mean, if you are talking about revenue crisis and you are making some of this avoidable, unnecessary expenditure, then you probably are not speaking true to yourself. So, yes, government needs to itself also know that things are difficult for it. It's also more difficult for working people. That's very important. And so it's a time of sacrifice on both sides. But more importantly, it's a time of clarity, understanding, speaking to each other. Part of Nigeria's lack of productivity is also the way our labor system works. The neoliberal economists were wrong, and it's proved now that the only way to get out of crisis is to strip labor of all earnings, crash social spending, then you get out of. No, you have to improve human capital, because human capital, innovation, the working people, productivity is actually what gets you out. So I think that we should invest more in protecting labor, improving the working class people, and expecting them to really work and deliver services. If, for example, in some states there are overbloated civil service or people are not working who need to be discharged, the state should, through a transparent process, get them out of the work and get them into maybe skills and things that they can do better. And so you keep at all times a productive labor force worth taking care of. At the same time, you look at the larger economy and ensure that people are producing, they are consuming first, and then they produce. So I think really that we need to stop strikes at this point, come together, create a corporatist governance where labor, business, and government work as one.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Sam Amadi.